Guys, 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 the league is gonna start in 3 days. We don't have any patch notes. Instead of making builds, we're looking at cat videos because they don't want to give us any information at all. What is happening to this game? Okay, so first things first. Okay, this is gonna go a little slowly, so try to keep up, right, with what I want to do with this concept. So first, let's understand how infusion works. Elemental infusion is, it's a two-part thing, right? Number one, this part is not a part of the skill. Can we agree with that? This is just a part of the Ascendancy, and it's not a part of the skill, right? So the Ascendancy node says grant skill infused weapon, right? And infused weapon is AoE, lightning, cold, and fire, and it says grant your weapon infusion, okay? Projectile attacks with that weapon consumes infusion to infuse the first projectile fired, causing it to explode at the end of its flight. And then the node that goes along with it, the fuck, why is there a cat there? It says when you consume a power charge, trigger infused weapon to gain 2 cold infusions. When you consume an endurance charge, you infuse weapons to get 2 fire infusions onwards, right? Here in the video, you can see in the Huntress Ascendancy, right? It shows you exactly what this skill does right here.
Fuse your weapon with elemental power, causing any projectile attacks to explode on impact.
So we can see that right here. You have a frenzy charge, right? He generated with parry.
Infuse
and
your
then he consumed it with, I don't know what. I don't know what he consumed it with. He consumed it with something. It looks like he threw a spear, right? And he consumed the charge, right? The frenzy. And it gave him 2 lightning infusions, right? They have a 15-second duration, and he throws 1 spear, and 1 infusion goes away.
Causing any projectile attacks.
And he throws another spear, and the other infusion goes away. This is Herald of Thunder. So can we have a good idea of how this skill works? You gain infusion, you throw projectiles, or use projectiles, and it consumes them. Okay. They made it so, like, if you use a bow, you don't consume 2 projectiles at once. You have to use 2 different skills, right? So, like, you can't just be a bow cuck and be like, oh, gain infusion, use all my infusion, gain infusion, use all my infusion, gain infusion, use all my infusion, and whore it with skills like spiral volley or snipe or such as, right? So they went through all of that, and they kind of like pre-nerfed bows for this. And you can see that infusion is 612 weapon damage at level 20. Means this skill, since it's a class skill, you get all your sockets for free at level 90, and you get level 20 for free, correct? So there's no problems with like using numbers from level 20 because you should get them at level 90. Here's the thing with PoE and why all of this stuff matters, right? Infused weapon is made for a spear skill. There is no weapon restrictions on this. It should be able to be used with a bow. It should be able to be used with anything, any weapon, crossbow, whatever, because there is no weapon restriction. As far as I know, they're probably going to add it on because they want nerfs, but it is made for one-handed spear. Now you think to yourself, what do we want to do once we find out this thing has 612 weapon damage? Obviously, you want to use the biggest weapon possible with the most damage, correct? So you're already going past what they want you to do, which is use it in a spear, okay? And you want to fire this thing 4 times a second, right? If you can get this off 4 times a second, you're doing Hammer of the Gods every second, and you're just destroying the game, right? So that's what we want to do, because you want to make this skill into basically Hammer of the Gods per second, because that's what we do in PoE. In order for you to do something like that, you have a selection between 2-handed mace and 2-handed crossbow. Anything else is like, well, bows with quivers is also strong, right, together, but that's a little bit harder to use. I picked crossbow for my 2-hander because I feel like crossbows at range, and crossbows have skills that have really, really fast attack speed to be able to dump all your things, right? Stuff like armor breaker, rapid fire, and shock burst rounds all have giga attack speed that you can literally just dump all your charges because they're all individual shots, as we found out from Deadeye and Tailwind, right? How rapid fire stacks Tailwind. They're all individual skills. So every single time you fire a rapid fire, you will consume 1 infusion for 1 massive damage on your crossbow. Okay. First thing you have to understand is how do you generate charges, right? And the easiest way to generate charges is with Red Flare Conduit. This item is the T4 unique. I did a chance orb test on this. This is very, very common, and it's a level 30 item. It says 20% chance to gain a power charge on hit, right? Here's the thing with Red Flare Conduit. If you have a skill that multi-hits, it will always basically generate you a power charge, but only one. So if you grab mobs, right, together, you can see that when I shoot Galvanic, because it's a multi-hit skill, that I'm gonna get a power charge, right? There's a chance I don't, because you can always get super, super unlucky, but in a map scenario, you're basically always getting a power charge, right? Then you can consume your charges while you're playing with any skill, Raise Zombies, Ember Fusillade like that, gaining infusion. And any hit after that, right, will basically proc the infusion, which is gonna be cold, which will give you combat frenzy, which will then get consumed by charge infusion, granting you an infinite circle of basically charges where you're just going around blowing up enemies for 1200 weapon damage every shot. 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200. With a two-handed weapon base that was designed to be twice the damage of like the original spear base anyways. So normally you just go power charge, boom, right? Grab that, boom. Get charges, charges get deleted. Boom. Grab charges, charges get deleted. Boom. And you're just going around and just blowing up monsters like non-stop. You want a low-level charge infusion because it says consumes one charges every 4.6 seconds, but it's actually 3.4 seconds if you use a really low-level one. You might want to vol it to get it like one level lower, so you can get a level 13, but basically you're looking at like one like charge infusion every 3 seconds, or 4 seconds, sorry. And that's the concept of the build. For single target, obviously we're not going to be able to get charges like this for single target, right? Then your rotation gets a little bit more complicated. It now becomes you put Sniper's Mark on the target, hold down Shock Burst rounds, because Shock Burst rounds does this, and you see the attack speed there on Shock Burst rounds, it will generate charges for you, and Ember Fusillade and Charge Infusion will consume charges for you. So you're doing this, Sniper's Mark, that, Sniper's Mark, this, Sniper's Mark, this, and that'll give you frenzies and powers, and you consume charges with Charge Infusion and Ember, or another skill, whichever one of you're choosing. Let me show you what the POV, so you guys can more understand. Don't look at damage. So for your rotation, you can see that Shock Burst rounds is 11.0 attack speed here, right? Which means it's going to take you 5 shots, which is half a second, to generate one power charge, right? So you start off your rotation, Sniper's Mark, hold down Shock Burst rounds for half a second, you're gonna generate a power. Then you're gonna cast Ember Fusillade, right? Which will consume the Shock Burst rounds. Then you press Shock Burst rounds again, and you unload within a second 4 weapon infusions. That is the same weapon damage as Hammer of the Gods. And then when you do your second rotation, you should be able to grab a frenzy charge from the Sniper's Mark, and when that gets consumed every 3 seconds, your damage goes from 1 Hammer of the Gods to 2 Hammer of the Gods every 3 seconds. So you have 1 1/3 Hammer of the Gods every second on this rotation. And if that doesn't kill every boss in the game super fast, I don't know what will, especially after the nerfs. It's a very ethical combo. It requires 3 buttons to press. It's definitely not for free. You technically don't even need to press Sniper's Mark if you just don't want to do the 1/3 more Hammer of the Gods. But normally when you're mapping, it is just this. Just do, consume, boom. And like a lot of times you don't even have to press Ember Fusillade because your Charge Infusion will consume the power charge for you, right? Depending on how fast you run. So a lot of the times it's just gonna be a straight 1-button build because you're gonna get your charges, right? And you're just gonna consume them with Charge Infusion. There's 3 things we don't understand. Whether this build works correctly, 100% correctly, or not. The first thing we don't understand is, will Elemental Infusion be able to stack your charges? Will you be able to consume more power charges whenever you need to get more charges so you can shoot more times? I'm hoping that's the case because then you can like, you know, in maps you can like consume all the excess power that you have and like use them when you want to because it's on a 15-second timer anyways. But if they decide not to do that, that's still fine, whatever, we'll just deal with it. The second question we asked is, because of the wording, it says grant your weapon infusion, projectile attacks with that weapon consumes infusions with an S here. So I'm guessing if you have multiple infusions, like fire, cold, and lightning, it will consume up to 1 of each one to proc the first projectile. I don't know if that's gonna be correct either, but the worst it could possibly be is on single target is 1 Hammer of the Gods per second, Optimally, if infusions works and you can do multiple, then it would be 1.3 Hammer of the Gods per second. Yeah, even if it's one, it's still good. The other thing that's good with the Ascendancy is if we can manage to get accuracy, flat crit would be our third node, and Stalking Panther would be our fourth node, and then we would just go into crit. And even 5.0 flat crit would be utterly insane on a crossbow because, you know, crossbow crit, XDD, right? Cat W, of course the cat is wearing Panther armor. Is that, like, I just explained to you a full concept of a build that does one hammer per second. And your reaction is Cat W, cat, of course cat will wear Panther armor. Really? So I have a tree planned out. You can generally see like what infused weapon is going to do with no gear, which is about 430k. I have a crossbow with like 2 mods and a North Paw with my tree. This is obviously worst case scenario, and I'm naked. So like if I play this build, I'm probably going to go into A0 with 3 million, 2 million is what I'm guessing based on what numbers they gave. It doesn't really depend on anything they do to galvanic shards or shock burst rounds or armor breaker or any of the numbers they nerfed, because the only number that I'm depending on to see what my damage is the number they already gave me. Now if they nerf this number, right, then, or have some sort of weapon restrictions after they see this is gonna happen, I have no idea, but this is basically Hammer of Gods once a second on like everything, right? I think it will be good if it works. If it doesn't, then you guys can all hate me, and I did the best I could with whatever information I had. I don't even know how I'm gonna level this right now, and I'll figure that out once we get more information. Or if we don't get information, I'm just gonna wing it. I think the build will even work without like North Paw, because like this node is, I fully expect this node to be nerfed, by the way. I think it's too good. So I don't think like, I don't think Infusion should be nerfed, because Infusion is like, it's just really broken with crossbows. That's all I have to say. That's not broken at all on spears or anything. It's just really broken on crossbows. I think it would be Infusion into Stalking, and then into Critical Strike. Right? Like if you're not going to be crit, then you're going to be Predatory Instincts. But I think Predatory Instincts is not a good name for Ascendancy. So I'm going to do my best to avoid Predatory Instincts at all costs, so I don't get memed on. Like, I don't even know why this node is called Stalking Panther. It should just be called like Stalker or something. Fits you either way, Lamau? What are you talking about? I'm not a stalk. I'm leaving. This chat is toxic. Okay, anyways, that's build concept number 1. The other build concept is bleed. I think we can make bleed work. We'll go over it right now. Okay, so hemo crystals. I will read the support for you. Supports attack skills that you use yourself, which can cause damaging hits. Supported skills consume bleeding on hit to create explosive blood-filled crystals, but cannot themselves inflict bleeding. And Hemocrystals, as it deals physical area damage based on the expected damage of the consumed bleed, right? Cannot cause bleeding. Hemocrystals have an radius of 1 meter. Hemocrystals detonate after 1.5 seconds. Hemocrystals are randomly created within 2.5 meters of a consumed bleed. Hemocrystals deal damage to 8% of the expected remaining damage of the consumed bleed. So basically what the skill does is you bleed something, right? Let's just keep it simple for now. You mace strike something, right? And you put a bleed on the target. And then you hit it with another skill of your choosing, let's say Bone Shatter, right? And then it's gonna remove that bleed from the target that you created with Mace Strike, and then it is going to make 4 crystals that have 32% or 32% total of the expected bleed from the mob. Here's the cool part about expected bleed. Expected bleed is really, really insane with duration, right? Because duration of elements goes up to 15%. So if you get 6 joules, you're like essentially like almost doubling the damage of your expected bleed just through with like duration of ailments, right? And there's also duration of ailments here, which like I'm thinking we're too far to get, but there's also duration of ailments here, which we're like right in line with. So this is what we do. This is what we do, right? So everybody understands so far, where nobody's lost, right? You bleed the target and then you consume it, right? So what GGG expects you to do is you go hit the target, boom, right? And hit it again. But that's not what we want to do because we're not idiots, right? What we want to do is have a skill that automatically consumes your bleed whenever you hit the target and hit the target as fast as possible, generating as many crystals as possible, and then boom, 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 boss dies, right? That's what we want to do. And how do we do that, right? There's two options, one being worse than the other. First, there's a skill called Lightning Rod, which then you would have to play Blood Mage. So every single time you're gonna fire a lightning skill, the Lightning Rod will proc and generate a crystal. And the other skill that we saw, I don't even know if this works properly, I'm guessing it does, is from Dawn of the Hunt, where he's explaining spear skills. And this is the thing.
On the ground or on enemies. But there are other skills that leave spears around too, like Storm Lance,
Look at the skill. Look at what the skill does.
that leaves an electrical spear that arcs towards enemies. But what can you do?
It's continuously arcing even though he's not attacking. I'm pretty sure these arcs do almost no damage, but I don't care. I don't give a This shit is literally gonna stick on the ground and proc all my bleeds constantly. So here's the thing, what we wanna do. Since hemocrystals explode every 1.5 seconds, right? Right here, it says hemocrystals explode 1.5 seconds, and you spawn 4 at a time. You want the maximum attack speed to be 3.33 seconds so you can never like just over consume your shit, right? So you put the spear on the ground and you're just like 3.3, attack, 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 crystals, 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 maximum duration, maximum duration, maximum duration, big ailment effect, and it's just gonna be boom, boom, boom. We don't know exactly how the scaling of hemocrystals work, but it has an attack tag. So are the hemocrystals going to be an attack? Are they going to double dip off of attack? We don't know that. What is, if it's an attack, is it going to have your weapon crit because it's an attack? Or is it going to be some sort of second damage that doesn't scale off of any of that? But even if it's secondary damage, it doesn't scale off any of that, there's still stuff like global increased damage because you're going to be holding a shield anyway, that you can get to like double dip on this damage, right? So imagine you're getting, if it scales with attack damage, 100% attack damage is gonna scale with your attack because you're gonna use that to bleed, and then it's gonna spawn the crystals, which also, it's gonna double dip and also scale off of that. So you're like, not only are you a double dipping build, but you're also a build who generates way more hemocrystals than they expect you to, because you're just like popping off max, right? So, and then thinking of all of that, I was thinking, how do we do all of this stuff with a less amount of work? And I think that bleeding concoction is probably the best way to do this, because you just hold a spear and bleeding concoction has 100% chance to bleed, so you don't need to invest in bleed chance. When you fight mobs, you can throw a bleeding concoction into the mob and it'll give every one of those mobs a single bleed, and then you can throw your spear on the ground and it's gonna create 20 crystals automatically and the ground is gonna explode and you're just gonna destroy the whole pack, right? That's the expectation of clear. And then single target is just throw the spear on the ground, bleeding concoction, bleeding concoction, bleeding concoction, bleeding concoction, over and over, and it's just gonna spawn a bunch of crystals and it's gonna blow up the boss. So that's essentially how I imagine the build working. I think it could work. I think it'd be pretty decent. And my defensive layer will be, since we are not poison on Pathfinder, we're gonna take enduring elixirs and get 2,500 life recovery per second, since you're getting discharge anyways, more flash charges, and you don't use your flash charges, and 2,500 ES recovery per second with a Chevron Satchel. So 5k recovery means you're gonna be super, super tanky and lots of content, and then you're gonna be able to clear really, really well and do a lot of single target damage with bleed, is what I'm hoping happens. I'm hoping that there's projectile skills on spears and melee skills, which, because they're both projectile and melee, so I don't see why that spears wouldn't have both projectile and melee on them. And if they do have projectile, it will do really well for bleeding concoction. Now, this also works with other stuff. Like if you want to play an Amazon straight up and use the Amazon bleeds, or even like playing on Titan and whatever, and just using Storm Spear to proc, I think it works. And it should be like really, really good on Titan too, or like some sort of Warrior, because Warrior is generally close to this node, and this is for sure gonna double dip. And if it does double dip with attacks, all the AoE attacks are on the Titan side, like stuff like this, right? AoE and AoE for attacks, and all of that stuff are all on like the Titan side and whatever. So I hope it works. I'm not sure what, like you could use almost any skill to bleed with. it doesn't have to be Bleeding Concoction. As long as you use like the Storm Spear tech to keep proccing the Hemo Crystals, I think it's going to be fine no matter what. So I feel like this concept could be solid for a multitude of classes, multitude of things. It would just be a Hemo Crystal build. But I like Pathfinder because 5k recovery is just way too good in the game. I experimented with this node off stream like at the end of last league, and I just ran around. 5k recovery in Path of Exile 2 is honestly a crazy stat, because if you understand how they're designing this game, recovery is like a big issue. Like they don't want to give you recovery, right? Especially on bosses, because they want you to run out of flasks and then die. Because if you have constant recovery, like you're gonna have PoE 1 and you can't get one shot, you'll just never die in this game. And that's not what they want in the game. And this gives you the option to do that. So it's something that probably they're gonna frown upon. They're not gonna like, but whatever, all we wanna do is do things they don't like. So that's the point of the game. And that's the concept behind this whole build. This tree is like whatever. I just click some nodes, whatever. I just want to see like where the travel is, but you definitely want stuff like wasting and stuff like that. Anyways, so those are the two concepts that I've been working on. I feel like both of them work. This sounds fun too. Yeah, that's what I want to do, right? I just want to make fun new builds for people and get them excited for every single league. But it's really hard when they don't give us patch notes or more information to get people more hyped. I hope they change their stance on sharing the information so people with knowledge of how to play the game can give the more casual crowd information so they can be more excited about, oh, I can play this next league. This looks really cool. But without the content coming out, I feel like it's kind of bad for the game. I at least try to make two concepts for you guys, and I hope these concepts work out. What are you guys linking? What guys, this is not relevant. This is not relevant to the discussion at hand. I'm leaving. This chat sucks. What the fuck?